configurations possible with this particular cube. And that's not too far off of a Google's, which is hard to imagine. But clearly the Google founders were interested in scalability when they named their company Google. So the crazy thing is that that number is so gigantic that, I mean, it's completely beyond comprehension, and yet the speed record for solving one of these is less than 4 minutes. It's about 3 3/4 minutes. It takes me a whole day, so I'm not going to demo. Anyway, these big numbers really, I think, give us a lot of perspective on what it is we're trying to do with scalability. And now just sort of getting back to the Agile tools. Last week, we looked at unit testing, and in particular, I think the things that mattered were JUnit, Ant, and cruise control. And this was all about building a test cycle that was automated and quick, and basically gave you the most flexibility to continue programming as fast as possible. There are a couple of other tools that are really useful, but not necessarily directly for coders on their own. And so I'm just going to bring them up in passing. But as you build a team, they actually launch a service. They become very valuable bits of communication as well. The ones that I've used and found very helpful, and since they're also open source and modifiable, I'm listing them here, are Track and Nagios. Track is a very easy to set up system that lets you basically track any kinds of issues that come into the system. So anybody who's not an engineer who wants to tell you about what's going on, be they an end user, project manager, QA people, they can submit stuff to Track, and it's very easy to sort of manage that. So again, something that really cuts down the friction on communication between engineers and the broader community. When it comes to Nagios, this is really about dealing with scaling your IT infrastructure. As soon as you get a bunch of different machines and you have to keep track of what's going on all of them, it gets very hairy to sort of log into each one individually and look at log files and stuff like that. So Nagios is a great way to sort of verify the liveness of your distributed system. And the two things that I got out of using Nagios was, one, I got a much deeper appreciation for what the failure modes were. And then two, when I was building the model for reporting that Nagios uses, I started to understand a lot better what types of failure modes mattered. So for me, Nagios is a great learning tool as well, because I started to appreciate a lot better how distributed systems can fail and what failures are really damaging and what failures I don't have to lose sleep over. By basically configuring Nagios, you learn a lot about how that works. So up until now, this week, I've really mostly just talked about tools. And tools are great, but they really only matter if you use them. And I mentioned the word force multiplier before. A tool is only as good as its usage, and so I've focused on tools that are easy to set up, and can be made to work with very little maintenance, and basically get out of the way when you don't need them. So I think these are great tools because the pain to use them is just is below the threshold of you're losing willingness to use them, which is actually one of the most important things ultimately when you don't have a lot of time. I mentioned processes in passing because a lot of, I don't know, companies and management people talk about processes, and whenever I hear the word, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to, I don't want to deal with this. So practices is really, what I like to talk about, and it's generally speaking things that are very easy to communicate, but that make a big difference in how effectively and efficiently you can do stuff. So, practice is what people actually do. And when it comes to Agile, there's a lot of things that basically take the flexibility that you might have working as an individual and sort of figure out how to make that work in a team environment. So, so communication is really the biggest focus here, and one of the things I've mentioned a couple times in the class is that having a very rapid release schedule is a great discipline to have, and the thing that I've found was really useful beyond just getting new software out to people on a regular basis was that I became a lot more capable of making quick planning decisions and understanding very quickly how tasks needed to be created and allocated. And if you let your release cycle stretch and get into the quarterly or 6 month or 1 year range, you find yourself in a situation where there's very little learning that you can take from actually implementing the release cycle. So I think the speed of the cycle actually is one of those things that's critical to its value. And what you tend to find is that if you compress this into a daily cycle, you end up hardly even doing any planning whatsoever. You kind of know by the time you've released your software in the evening what it is you're going to be working on the next day. And so it might just be like a one-line email to other people saying, I'm going to work on this tomorrow or something like that.
Is that good compared to the week cycle?
I think so. It depends a lot on your customer's tolerance for failure and errors. Daily release cycles increase somewhat the risk of errors that aren't caught during the testing. But if you've got a website and the functionality it provides is pretty unique and differentiated, people are going to tolerate those small errors, and they usually tend to be smaller ones in this type of a release cycle. So yes, I would say daily is great if you're in the right category of application. Clearly, if you're doing client-based software where people have to download stuff or even auto download, auto upgrade, it becomes much less of a popular solution. There's questions. Okay. I mentioned in here, many whiteboards and stand-up meetings. Basically, just again, communication tools. Stand-up meetings are just an interesting way of holding a group meeting. In this class environment, I'm the only one standing, and you know how long I'm going to be here. But in a typical company meeting, if you don't have something to sort of force the end of the meeting at some level, they can drag on. And just having everybody stand up is a great way to make sure that that they end sooner rather than later. And you can add things like 1-minute rules for how long people talk. The thing that's really interesting is that remarkably a lot of information gets exchanged during a course of a stand-up meeting where you bring a bunch of people together.
What's the average time of a stand-up meeting?
Well, try to keep it around 15 minutes, yeah. And of course less if there's fewer of you.
How many people and how many times a day?
Generally like once a day. Yeah.
How many people?
Up to about 20. It gets really hard beyond 20. I mean, at that point, one thing that you can do is actually